They flooded their fields, and as the rains poured in, a new river took shape, spreading 100 metres wide across the land. This is Wild Woodbury, a 170-hectare rewilding experiment by Dorset Wildlife Trust, one of the UK's most ambitious nature recovery projects. Once an intensive farm, now it's transformed to a landscape of wetlands, heath and wild meadows. Hidden rivers are resurfacing, lapwings, nightjars and adders are returning, and even the village is shaping its future. But restoring nature isn't as simple as letting water in. Some things have worked and others haven't. So how did this landscape change so dramatically? Let's find out. Rob, thank you so much for hosting us today and showing us around your wonderful projects. I'd love just to kick off with a bit of a background on Wild Woodbury.
Yeah, lovely to have you here. So welcome to Wild Woodbury. So Wild Woodbury's down in Dorset, owned by Dorset Wildlife Trust. We purchased the site in the summer of 2021, and it's a natural process, rewilding, wild kept, whatever you want to call it, site, which is kind of led by nature. So it's about 170 hectares, so a decent chunk for Dorset. And one of the most interesting things about Wild Woodbury is right on the doorstep of a community of Beer Regis. So it's not just out in the middle of nowhere. The other thing is that it's got incredibly complex soils, which is great because it creates all these niches for different wildlife, which we're already seeing returning. But also because this site is all about learning and sharing and inspiring, it makes us more relevant to more people. So we've got chalk, we've got clay, we've got loam, we've got sands, we've got gravels, everything's squeezed together in this relatively small space. I mean, we're stood here testing out our wellies. We've done a big Stage 0 river restoration project on the headwaters of the River Sherford. So the site has changed dramatically in a quite short space of time. So as you can see, it's very wet now in certain places. And it's been a fantastic place to just learn about species that were already clinging on here and how they spread on the site, but also which species we're seeing coming in.
So this is the site.
Here we are. The areas, this front field here, and this field that zooms off in the distance is all open access. The main area to see Stage 0 stuff is the other side of the site. This big grazing unit here, which is about 110 hectares, is currently being grazed by 5 Exmoor ponies, 6 Redbridge cattle and 2 piggies. Start up here, so we'll actually go that way, and then we'll come back through the open access. So yeah, all open access this area.
He's the gent.
He's meant to just represent the older generation and the younger generation. So instead of battling against each other, it's actually everyone's in the same boat.
I really like it.
Yeah, pretty insane chainsaw artist in Wales.
Yeah.
We are kind of again working with the community about
what you could do.
What we could do there. So they are, for example, wanting a new location for their village hall. So we've said, well, do you want to be here? Their doctor's surgery was looking for a new location. So we said, well, do you want to be here?
I love the idea.
That would have been very exciting.
But
they were told they're not priority funding.
No.
Which is a massive shame because we could have gone full Shinrin-yoku, Japanese style health here.
And that would have been amazing.
Outdoor waiting rooms, outdoor consultation spaces. The Japanese model, what we were trying to do here was not so much green prescription, it's trying to keep you healthy. Yeah. So the Japanese
preventative
model is,
maintenance.
So they have doctor surgeries in the middle of the woodland. Yeah. And you have to walk there for 2 hours to go to the doctors, thus getting your weekly dose of forest bathing.
Yeah.
This was an arable field. This last crop was taken, which was barley, in September 21, and since then nothing has happened.
Since 21, wow.
Other than a lot of monitoring on soil carbon, soil eDNA, and a lot of wildlife monitoring, and archaeological monitoring actually.
Any surprises in the eDNA results that you weren't expecting?
This particular field has thrown some surprises. So since the first year, we've had woodlark breeding here.
Oh wow.
So if woodlark were to read about themselves in the bird books, they would discover that they're not meant to be here. Yeah. This is the chalk side of Wild Woodbury.
Okay.
And if they'd read about themselves, they would know that they're very fussy heathland birds.
Why have they come here, do you think?
Because habitats are just a human construct, aren't they?
Yeah.
The wildlife doesn't know what habitat it's in.
No.
The cattle come in for scratching posts, and these have all been rubbed smooth by cattle. You can see the hair has come off, and they also create these kind of churned up small patches as well. All the species we think of heathland species are generally invertebrates, or things that eat invertebrates.
Okay.
And do they need heathland, or are they just there because we haven't sprayed that and intensively farmed it?
Yeah.
You don't have to go look that far back in kind of British literature to know that nightjars, for example, were common as muck everywhere. We just come suddenly to a bit of a splodge here. This is where the chalk meets the clay.
Okay.
So all the groundwater moving through the chalk suddenly meets this impenetrable barrier.
Yeah, because we're high up here, aren't we?
We're higher up and we're wet. So all along the highest ground in Wild Woodbury, the lines of springs, and it gets really wet. So the higher up you go, the wetter it is, and that's just
so
where,
bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
just where the waters can't go any further. It's being pushed up in these springs. This is the area where you can see the kind of the brambles protecting willow, hawthorn,
Okay, yeah,
oak,
look at that.
ash, hazel all the way through the back there. And what we've noticed is here that two things are happening. One is the species that were clinging on the edges are spreading everywhere.
Yeah.
And two, we're getting these new species in. So we're in the clay proper now, to the extent that this field's old name is clay cuts. So just in the sky there we've got a common buzzard flying around with a sparrowhawk, but it's always worth checking here. It's a bit early in the year, but there are honey buzzards around this area. We have breeding goshawk here, hobby, they'll come back in later as well. Good chance of seeing white-tailed eagles as well from the relocation project down on the Isle of Wight.
Wow.
So it's we've got hen harriers, so it's a good kind of plethora of raptors down here. And that sparrowhawk was telling that buzzard off somewhat, but he's now disappeared. Here probably sums up the very kind of simple, soft touch approach we had to the stage zero river restoration here. So we've got a relatively small incoming stream here. It comes down a straight ditch here, and it comes down here. It used to then go straight on up the trees here, up that hill. It's absolutely insane when we had the study done, how many water courses, the ditch courses, are nowhere near the actual where gravity would put it, so they're called perched.
Yeah, I can see why you said we needed wellies.
It's absolutely insane how much water a ditch is actually throwing out when you can't even see the water in the ditch. There are some ditches that for various reasons we had to block, never seen any water in it, and then suddenly 2 weeks later it's full. It was so deeply cut, we just thought, look, we're not going to try and sort this out. We'll sort it out further down. We'll try and stop this other reconnected channel getting into it further down. But in the meantime, we thought what we need to do is raise this bed level again. Because essentially you can see where the ground comes down from the field. You can imagine, had they not dug a ditch here, where the low ground would be. Here is leaky dams.
Yeah, perfect.
The idea being we need to trap sediment to raise this bed level to try and, in the future, we want to get it back here.
Yes.
And you're talking, I'd say, over 1/2 metre of sediment.
No way, wow.
That's just been coming off farm fields to the north.
Yeah.
So that's topsoil. You know, that's important.
Yes.
And previously it was just going down. We're actually trapping all that sediment and we're delivering cleaner water. Here it's doing a nice job. It's raising this bed up, which means in the future, hopefully we will be able to get it back into that low ground.
Be the cat in the sun. Set aside every empty spread.
For the first 2 years, we didn't find a single frog on Wild Woodbury.
Wow.
As soon as we did the wetland work, we started seeing frog spawn, loads of frogs. This year it's just something else. There is just frog spawn everywhere. Little freshwater shrimp. The other interesting thing here is you'll see quite a lot of rounded gravels. and that's an indication of water flowing here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, again, I've just picked up that, and there's a massive water in there.
Oh yeah,
That's quite, you know, that's good news. That means at some point, and rivers change.
Yeah.
This idea that we're putting the river back to its historic course, that doesn't really make sense, because they move everywhere. They just occupy the lowest ground in a floodplain, and that the lowest ground can change due to sedimentation. But at some point, the river was flowing here because we've unearthed this riverbed.
Be the cat inside.
We can see here where the different colour of the grass shows where that water's flowing. It's much greener here, and that's for two reasons. One, it's because it's got the water source, but we've also found that the ponies and the cattle here preferentially graze in the wetland. Or it could be that the grass and the vegetation that's growing there is more nutrient rich, because we're in essence here cleaning nutrient rich water. So if you look down here at this film and we tap it, and you see it kind of cracks, like an iceberg. You'd imagine an iceberg to crack. That shows that it's a film of bacteria, which is great for me, because that bacteria is busily changing, removing nitrates from the water. It's cleaning the water. If it was oil, because people often see this and they think, oh goodness me, there's an oil spilt here. Yeah. It doesn't crack like that.
No, okay.
It doesn't crack, it kind of just keeps on forming. One of the really interesting stories and information that's coming from Wild Woodbury at the moment is about adder and how they move. So I used to use adders as an example of a species that will take a long time to return here, because the kind of general thinking is they're very site specific to where they hibernate.
Okay.
And if you damage that hibernacula, that's it. And that probably is the case for most adder populations, but it's not necessarily because they don't want to move big distances. It's probably just because there are no options. And again, we've discovered here, we had a tiny remnant population, but in the last couple of years, we found evidence of them breeding in these new piles that we just accidentally made. These are just collateral piles when we've been doing our wetland work.
Okay.
The drivers were just throwing a mix of soil and plants over their shoulder, basically, which actually makes a perfect hibernactor for adders. So this is quite interesting. These piles here that I'm looking at, almost immediately we started seeing adders in them. And we've now had evidence of adders breeding in 3 of these piles.
Amazing.
Just inside 2 years. So we've seen gravid female adder, so pregnant female adder, and then come back a few weeks later to find 4 juveniles.
So I guess this is where it all began.
We're stood, thankfully, with wellies on, in the middle of a new natural flow path across this field. To just kind of row back a bit, when we were first looking at buying this site, we were actually more interested in some of the neighbouring parcels of land that we didn't manage to buy, and that's because they had a river on it, and we were very interested in doing river restoration. And it wasn't until I started walking around this land that I realised there was a river here. It was just hidden out of sight, and that's unfortunately the case all over the lowlands in England, where we have drained out our rivers. So we're on the headwaters here of a very small river called the Sherford, and you wouldn't have been able to tell that if you looked at a map, and you certainly wouldn't have been able to tell that if you just looked over a field gate, because the river had been drained into field drains and into ditches. So straight lines, aim is get the water off the land as quickly as possible. So I think one of the big things we've learnt here is that rivers should be everywhere, and we've completely forgotten how wet our land should look in the winter when it rains, and we've lost that functionality of storing water when it's plentiful in the winter, so that we've still got some in the summer when it's not. Stage 0 isn't talking about the interventions or the things you have to do. It's actually the state that you get it back into. Okay. So sometimes it can be very simple to return a river to stage 0, and other times you have to do a bit more. The low ground is here where we're stood, and this was incredibly simple to put it back. We just had to block up a tiny bit of the ditch, and we built a tiny little bit of a pilot channel, which is just a little helping hand to get the water away from the man-made feature. And then we just built a tiny little channel up into the point where the field was the same level as the bottom of the ditch. So we knew that the water couldn't back up and cause any issue to the road. And then we released it.
Yeah.
So we didn't re-wiggle the channel or anything, we just released it, let the water go, and the water is now cutting its own channels, and we've got this kind of sinuous, ribbony flow that gets much wider when it rained,
Okay.
and contracts to kind of favour channels if it doesn't rain for a while.
How wide does it expand to?
This flow expands to nearly
Oh wow.
the bramble over there. So what's that? 50 metres that way, and there you can see a few kind of sinuousy channels back maybe 50 metres that way. So we're probably about 100 metres wide that this flows. So this isn't a field that's flooded, this is just the river.
Yeah, amazing.
And already we're seeing favourite channels being cut out.
Why do a project like this?
There's a number of reasons why the status quo that was here in terms of how the water was being managed wasn't working anymore. For the problems we face now, and also a whole stack of benefits that when you put a river back to where it should be, that you then gain. So the issues that the site was facing is, and these are made worse by things like climate change, the land was aggressively drained, which means when water is plentiful and falls in the winter, nothing is kept on land. The whole idea of that drainage is to get the water off as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. People were trying to farm this. It was an incredibly challenging place to farm, but that's why they were doing it. And so that water was being shot off the land, going down into the River Sherford, which itself is deepened and straightened and in a poor state, which means it very quickly ended up in Poole Harbour. And anything coming off the farm fields, any fertiliser, anything coming out of drains or septic tanks or roads, going in the harbour as well, which is very heavily designated and on a knife edge precipice of kind of ecological disaster. By spreading this water out, we're slowing it down, we're capturing sediment, we are allowing the water to slow down to the extent where bacteria and plant life are removing nutrients. So we're delivering cleaner water down to our neighbours and down to Poole Harbour. Wetter soils hold more carbon, so we're sequestering carbon. And of course, we're a wildlife trust. You add water in and wildlife erupts. It took us a year to come up with the idea, to get a feasibility study, to fund it and to deliver it.
Quick.
So it can be very simple. Some river projects for various reasons can be very complicated and expensive, but they can also be reasonable and quick to do.
So we've got some of your beautiful animals here. What do you have here?
So we've got behind us some rare breed native cattle. These are original population Herefords. Commercial Herefords are quite common, you see them in quite a lot of places, but these are the kind of original ones, much smaller, much shorter in the leg, much dinkier.
Yeah, they're very sweet.
And really well suited to this kind of landscape. Behind in the distance you can see some of our Exmoor ponies. We've got 5 Exmoor ponies, and somewhere out there's just 2 pigs. We've decided to introduce grazing animals onto the site relatively early, so after a couple of years of the land being some and obviously you don't want to just pour in grazing animals because you actually want the land to recover, and you want some trees and scrub to start growing, and you don't want things to come and graze it off. But we felt that if we started with very low numbers across a very large area, which is what we've got here, they're not going to have that impact in stopping that natural succession of plants, but we're going to get their randomness, their disturbance, and their unmedicated poo, which are bringing in dung beetles and things. And the other nice thing about this is we're working with our immediate neighbouring farmer. She is the owner of these animals, they're hers, so we work with her, because we felt it very important that we wanted to show that there was a sustainable farming business here for a farmer as well. This one here is either a Berkshire Mangalitsa cross or a Berkshire, and the Berkshire's a rare British breed. This girl here is a Mangalitsa, which is a Hungarian rare breed pig. The reason we've got Mangalitsa is because they are plentiful in this area. We were talking about that saying, like a pig in clover. It's
Yeah.
because they cannot walk past clover without eating it. I'm not a good botanist, but I'm pretty sure this is lesser celandine. This field here, up until just now, has been a very strong monoculture of grass, which is just a bit of a bully. It's just really lovely to see that something's already taking advantage of that little niche. It's just been given a little bit of space without competition, and that's all it needs. We wanted to open up space here for people to be able to enjoy this space as well and connect with nature. So that area that we've opened up, yes, we want it to be better for nature, and it's already being hunted by barn owls again, and lots of species are returning. But there's a growing disconnect between people and nature as well, and that has its own kind of issues.
Thank you so much for taking the time to show us around your wonderful
No
project.
worries, thanks for getting me out.
Absolutely loved it. I'd love to finish on a positive. What gets you most excited about the future of everything that's happening here?
I think it's very rare that you can kind of start from something and create something and see it from the start to wherever it goes. And there's no end point in a project like this. What it does mean is that there's endless anticipation and endless excitement, because there's just endless change. It's changing all the time. Sometimes that change isn't necessarily noticeable to me unless I look back at pictures of the early days and I think, oh yeah, oh, I completely forgot that's what that place looked like. And sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes I'll go there, like we saw a few things today where I saw something, I was like, I've never seen that here before.
Yeah.
So it's that constant excitement of, you don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what you're going to see from season to season. We often joke here that when it's winter, we can't wait for the spring, and when it's summer, we can't wait for it to rain again.
Yeah.
Because we're just constantly excited to see, I wonder what the wetlands will look like this year, because they're just changing all the time. And I wonder what species will come back and breed here this year. I think already this project's been incredibly freeing in terms of Dorset Wildlife Trust's thinking, but it's also already helped us help other people, and it's kind of inspired other projects.
It's a multiplier effect.
Yeah,
amongst
that are
others,
brilliant in their own right,
Yeah.
in Dorset, but further afield as well. We're now part of a much bigger project called the Wareham Arc, which is one of the Round 1 landscape recovery projects,
Yeah.
of which this is the most northwesterly point. And we're 170 hectares. Wareham Arc covers over 4,000 hectares. So that's meaningful landscapes that we can add what we've learned from here to help that much bigger landscape. And that's what's really exciting. It feels like finally,
Yeah.
hopefully not too late, there's some progress and there's a bit of a snowball effect.
No, for sure. Well, I'm very excited to see the change and progress, and hopefully invite myself back in the future.
Well, welcome anytime.
So thank you for having us.
If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to subscribe and follow our journey. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.